All right, joining me once again here on the Matthew Filipowicz Show is my good friend Sarah Jaffe. Sarah is an independent journalist. His work has been seen in Truth Out, In These Times, Jacobin, The Nation, Alternet, and many more. She is the co-host of Dissent Magazine's Belabored podcast, all of which and more you can find at adifferentclass.com. You can also follow her on Twitter at Sarah L. Jaffe. Sarah, thank you so much for being on the show again.
Thank you for having me back, as always.
All right, so Sarah, I got to be honest with you. For the longest time, you have been sounding the warning bell on just how horrible New York Governor Andrew Cuomo is. I mean, you've been one of the first. You've been on this since the very, very beginning. You recently wrote a really great piece at In These Times about the charter school battle that's going on in New York. Why don't you tell us all about it?
Oh my God! You know, you brought that up, and I realized that when I was at Alternet, I wrote an article that was like the 10 worst Republican governors or the kinds of things that we wrote over there all the time. And I put in an honorable mention for Andrew Cuomo, who is not a Republican governor, but is still terrible. So yeah, I really have been on this beat for a while. So what's going on here now is that back when Bill DeBlasio, our new mayor of New York City, was running for mayor, he made the, in my mind, very reasonable proposition that well-funded charter school chains could afford to perhaps pay rent or not be located alongside of public schools in public school buildings, right? The implication being that if you only educate 6% of New York City's kids and you get to sort of select which kids you're going to take and bring into your school, then you don't need access to our facilities for free when the public schools have to take all the kids. So fast forward to last week, Bill de makes the very reasonable step of rejecting a few charter school co-locations, which is what it's called when they dump a charter school inside of a regular school building.
Is it sort of like squatting, kind of? I mean, it's sort of like squatting, right?
Well, I mean, it's legal. It's totally allowed,
exactly.
Right. So what happens is, I talked to this to a teacher who teaches at this co-located school up in Harlem. That the second floor is this charter school, and he says, when you go upstairs, it's like night and day, the facilities, because the charter school gets all these private donations from, hedge fund jerks in addition to public money, which they get public money. And so they have these really nice facilities and whatever, but it's a selective admission process. And then the kids downstairs, who are all the rest of the kids, including an entire school for kids with special needs, kids with developmental disabilities or anything, the facilities are a lot less, well off. So de Blasio rejects 3 co-locations for this one particular charter school chain, which is owned by a woman named Eva Moskowitz, who once upon a time was a member of the New York City Council at the same time as Bill de Blasio. And so Eva Moskowitz makes the entirely not reasonable step of closing all of her schools and busing all of her students at her miscellaneous different, the chain is called Success Academies, up to Albany to have a big rally about how charter schools are awesome and de Blasio is a big meanie. And this
all right, so let's take this again, because this is again one of these parts of this that is very, very interesting about this story.
Yeah.
So this owner of a charter school, who just had Bill de Blasio reject their getting rent for free from New York public schools,
having them three of them. Only three of them. She got a ton of them.
Right. So only 3. So then she decides to, for the day, close her charter schools. Close the schools. Take the children out of their education. They would be learning things. They're doing their math and their science. Presumably, it's a charter school. You never know. They're probably learning neoliberalism and all that crap. But anyway,
they're preparing for their standardized tests, certainly.
Exactly, precisely. But so she takes these children out of these charter schools, puts them on buses, and drives them up to Albany, New York, for a rally on a school day.
Yes,
that's what actually went down. Yeah. On a Thursday. Unbelievable.
On a school day. Yeah, and this rally day, we just happened conveniently to coincide with a lobby day that Bill de Blasio and people who support his universal pre-K initiative and the tax on the rich people that goes with his pre-K initiative had scheduled to go lobby Governor Cuomo about universal pre-K. For universal, we note, right? Universal, which is the thing that charter schools aren't. And so what does Andrew Cuomo do? Well, if you thought that he was going to say that universal pre-K was a wonderful thing, no, he showed up at the charter school rally instead, talking about how he was going to make sure that funding dedicated to charter schools was assured. And fast forward, this is not in the article. A few days ago, it comes out that Cuomo and a bunch of Republicans and a few so-called Democrats in the state Senate have a bill now that would essentially invalidate Bill DeBlasio's ability to say refuse co-locations to charter schools. It would dedicate more funding to charter schools, would essentially create not just like mayoral control, which we've already got, which is already terrible, but actually like mostly state control of New York City public schools.
So under this bill, the state could theoretically say that, hey, public school, you need to provide this space for these charter schools.
Yeah, you need to move over, kids, because we're putting a charter school in your gym class.
Wow.
Yeah. So, this is why Cuomo's the worst. But, I wrote this article and I really tried to make this point that this is not just a battle of egos between these three people, between Moskowitz and Cuomo and DeBlasio, except like when you're talking about Andrew Cuomo, it's always about his ego. This is a guy we know wants to run for president, that we know has sort of made his bones being the sort of triangulator between Republicans who are mostly from upstate and, the city liberals who have money who are concerned about things like marriage equality but aren't so concerned about paying higher taxes maybe. And meanwhile, the vast majority of New Yorkers who aren't millionaires get screwed.
Yeah.
So this is the ongoing story of Andrew Cuomo, who is sort of the epitome of this tendency within the Democratic Party now that Bill Clinton doesn't hold office anymore. And we've got Rahm, and never forget Rahm. But Andrew Cuomo is in charge of a whole state, so there's that.
Yeah, and again, I think this is like, I think the kind of the overall point, and again, Cuomo is horrible, and, New Yorkers, come on, New Yorkers, really? I mean, like, hopefully, maybe there's a bit of a sea change. I mean, they did elect DeBlasio, at least in the city, maybe. When is Cuomo actually up for election again?
This year.
Like when? All right. So is there someone perhaps a little more left from Andrew Cuomo that might be running against him, or is it,
this is the question. I mean, it took forever for him to even get a Republican opponent, and there are rumors that he's got his fingers involved in the process by which he's getting his Republican opponent.
Talk about that, because that's actually a very interesting side of this too. So, and the kind of the theory on why he actually is doing this. This is actually kind of a funny little story here.
I mean, this is actually something I've been less digging into than some of the other stuff about charters and whatever. But it's my understanding that there are, nobody wants to run against Cuomo because he's got a huge war chest. Because I know you're shocked to hear that he gets a lot of donations from real estate and from Wall Street, say.
Yeah, I am shocked to hear that.
Nobody wants to run against Cuomo. Anyway, it's hard to run against Cuomo to his right. The guy who ran last time was a little bit of a, special case. Guy named Palladino. And so, now there are rumors that Cuomo's fingers are involved in this process because he wants a more moderate person to run against, which I don't really understand why you would think that he would want, like, the guy like the one last time who, But Andrew Cuomo, man. Andrew Cuomo has to control everything, right? Including apparently New York City public schools. So, but your question about whether somebody that people who listen to your show might be more interested in voting for might run against him is a different question. And I wrote about this recently as well. And I wrote a story for In These Times about the Working Families Party and the strategy that they've had is they've been spreading outside of New York and doing different things than their previous strategy of just sort of cross-endorsing Democrats. But this all ends up coming back down to Cuomo because their existence on the ballot in New York State is contingent upon them getting 50,000 votes in the election for governor. So if they don't have a candidate who gets 50,000 votes in the election for governor, they lose that ballot line and they have to do the whole petitioning process over again to get on it the next time, which is not impossible. It's just a pain in the ass. So, but the real thing is that, like, I don't know if you've been listening to the last 10 minutes that I've been ranting about how Andrew Cuomo is terrible, but Andrew Cuomo is terrible. and specifically, Andrew Cuomo is terrible on the very things that the Working Families Party cares about, which is things like money, things like the minimum wage, things like a millionaire's tax, which we managed to sort of squeeze through past him after this huge protest you might have heard of called Occupy Wall Street blew up.
Right.
And so the real question is that, you know, if they endorse Cuomo because they need to keep their line on the ballot, how many people are going to just go, well, are you really a progressive alternative to the Democratic Party if you're endorsing this terrible dude?